Okay, so that was the first day of the conference, and the second day was spent on polygamy. So that was Saturday. This is Sunday. So Sunday morning, Orson Pratt was the only speaker, and he said he spoke on the topic of the plurality of wives, saying, "I have not been in the habit of publicly speaking on this subject because it was always denied and never acknowledged." So it's been called the worst kept secret, right? So he's like, "I'm not used to talking about this in public." He goes on to say, "It is well known, however, to the congregation before me that the Latter-day Saints have embraced the doctrine of plurality of wives as a part of their religious faith." So as I said, he's the only speaker. So he goes on. It's a very long and complicated, to me, rather confusing sermon, kind of laying out, the reasons for polygamy. If I'm understanding him correctly, the main idea, or one of the central ideas that seems to me to be the idea behind polygamy, is that men are, more men, like these leaders in particular, are going to become gods and populate worlds with infinite spirit children. And so based on the understanding that God promised Abraham more descendants than the sands of the sea, and those promises belong to the Latter-day Saints, so they need many wives to have all those spirit children. That's what I got as one of the central ideas behind why they believed polygamy to be an essential doctrine. And we just did our episode on Abraham, so I hope that we can understand how that isn't an accurate idea. It's a misunderstanding or a misapplication of it. And so he absolutely declares that polygamy is an essential doctrine that must be lived in order to reach exaltation. So basically, no one who's not a polygamist is going to be exalted. He then makes, this was sad. He then makes this argument that I've encountered before with polygamist men, and I've always just found it so problematic and lacking and honestly just distasteful. And so it was really disappointing to see that this argument, that Orson Pratt made the same argument. I don't know if it originated with him or if polygamous men today get this idea from him, or if everyone just comes up with it on their own. But I wish that this hadn't been included. So I'm just going to tell you, he makes this argument where he equates monogamy with prostitution, adultery, whoredoms, and says polygamy is the solution. So he's talking about like the Christian men who reject polygamy. He says, "It matters not to them how corrupt they are in female prostitution. If they are lawfully married, it matters not to them how corrupt they are in female prostitution if they are lawfully married to only one wife. But it would be considered an awful thing to them to raise up a posterity for more than one wife. This would be wrong indeed. But to go into a brothel and there debauch themselves in the lowest haunts of degradation all the days of their lives, they consider only a trifling thing." So that's it. He talks about it for quite a while. That's one of his quotes. And so I don't even know if I have to point out the problems with this argument, but I'm going to try to really fast. There are just so many problems. So first of all, as if it is the people who oppose polygamy who are the people who engage in prostitution. Like, people who oppose polygamy usually do so on moral grounds, right? And they are usually people who value morality and fidelity in monogamy. And to claim that everybody who's not a polygamist is a debaucher is just so strange. And he goes on and talks more about haunts of prostitution, degradation, and misery, and says that they can't be allowed to come into the cities of the mountains. So how is this to be prevented? For we have got a fallen nature to grapple with. It is to be prevented in the way the Lord devised in ancient times, that is, by giving to his faithful servants a plurality of wives. Okay. So again, this argument, okay, so on the one hand, we are told that polygamy has nothing to do with lust and is only for the very most righteous men. And yet, if those men aren't given multiple wives, they will be debauching with prostitutes. I mean, it just implies that clearly God's commandment of morality and monogamy and fidelity is just unreasonable, because men have got a fallen nature to grapple with. They can't possibly expected to be faithful to only one woman. I mean, there's more that you could say, but it is just so incredibly insulting to men. Like, good men exist, and God wants good men who can be faithful to one wife. So this argument is just, I just think it was so, it just made me sad to see that it was used. It's so illogical, so just blah. Okay, so we're just going to move on from that, because I guess that argument has been around since the beginning of polygamy, and that's disappointing. So he goes on to give more explanations and justifications for polygamy, and then, and as I said, it is absolutely an essential doctrine. Nobody who is not a polygamist will reach exaltation. And then he warns that those who hear this principle and reject it will be damned. He clarifies that, Mormon damnation is different than hellfire and brimstone. It's falling short of exaltation and not being married in the next life. And just the whole thing was really interesting because it's so, well, I mean, so many things, but obviously so male-centric. Like, the women, it doesn't even act as if the women are exalted. They're just kind of the means to help these men be exalted. So it was just kind of like, whoa, okay, I'm glad that's not the focus of the church anymore. So anyway, that was the morning session. And